Bismillahirrahmanirrahim and Assalamu alaikum, dear listeners. Today is Ramadan day 3 here in the UK, and I hope you're all well and you're enjoying the special moments of calm that we experience during the month of Ramadan. And I hope that these videos are also contributing a little bit in your rejuvenation and adding to your calm and repose, especially in the fractured world that we live in. I think it's so important to take out these moments and remind ourselves of what truly, truly matters. I mentioned to you in the last video that I was going to talk about the metaphor of the path, and that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to talk about the metaphor of the path. You will be familiar with it. The Quran uses it quite often, but I'm going to specifically focus on the path set out in Surah Al-Fatiha, which becomes more visible if you ponder over the structure of the surah. So I'm going to also in this video introduce you to the idea of structure in the Quran, because often the Quran is explained as a jumble of verses, very disparate, not linked to each other. And actually it is a beautifully set out, coherent bit of text. And I'm sure you've noticed that the ducks have decided to come back into view and be very loud. Anyway, I shall continue. The Arabs were desert dwellers. Many travelled far distances, navigating during the day and using the stars at night to set the travel direction. The literal meaning of the word Sharia is the path to water, and you can imagine, especially when you recall the imagery of the Quran that I read out to you in the last video, that reaching an oasis with water would be akin to a stay in a heavenly garden. So following the Sharia leads us to an oasis. The metaphor of the path is also invoked in the Quran to remind us that our job is to focus on the quality of the journey. There are no guarantees that we will arrive at the best destination. That guarantee only sits with Allah, because He is the owner of the Day of Judgment. So only He can decide what our destination is going to be. And this point dovetails very nicely with the messages in Surah Al-Fatiha, the opening chapter of the Quran, which is set out as a supplication or a dua, in response to which Allah gave us the Quran, the guidance that we needed to find and navigate our path to the oasis. So I'm going to be using today Raymond Farrin's excellent work titled Structure and Qur'anic Interpretation, a study of symmetry and coherence in Islam's holy text. Farrin has suggested that many Quranic narratives and chapters have a ring structure, with the central idea in the middle of the ring, although some scholars have critiqued his theory. I found a copy of his book on the Internet Archive, and I'll make sure that I add a link to it in the description as well if you want to refer to the sections that I've mentioned today. I'm borrowing insights from pages 18 to 24 of the online version. Now, Farrin is suggesting that Al-Fatiha has one small ring and a key connecting verse within it. I've added an image to the video to help you understand. But let's read Surah Al-Fatiha together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahmanir Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een, Ihdinas siratal mustaqim, Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim, Ghayril maghdubi alayhim, Waladdallin. Ameen. So let me just break those verses down, and again I'm using Yusuf Ali's translation. Praise be to Allah, the cherisher and sustainer of the worlds, most gracious, most merciful, the Rahman and the Rahim, master of the Day of Judgment, Maliki Yawmiddin. Now, notice the structure in these verses. The first one is, praise be to Allah, the cherisher and sustainer of the worlds. Now, Raymond Farrin categorizes the theme of the verse as awesomeness or majesty of God. So the first verse in Al-Fatiha is about the awesomeness or majesty of God. The second one, most gracious, most merciful. Here, mercy is stressed twice, Rahman and Rahim. And then master of the Day of Judgment, which again is awesomeness. So what sits in the middle of this small ring is the idea of God's mercy. So my conclusion from ring 1 is that mercy is at the center of this first ring. And it's mentioned twice, once for creation and sustaining that creation, and second for Allah's sustained mercy on the Day of Judgment. Let's move on to the rest of this chapter. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een, Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Thee do we worship, and thine aid we seek. Now, my view here is that the connecting center of this surah is this particular verse, and I'll explain how this is the connecting center of this surah, because it links between the first section and the last section of the surah, and I'll come to it in a moment. The next verse is Ihdinas siratal mustaqim, show us the straight way. Now here the theme is guidance. Then in the longest and the last verse, Allah says, Sirat al-ladhina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. The way of those on whom thou hast bestowed your grace. So mercy emphasized. Again, those whose portion is not wrath. So God does not associate with wrath, or God is not associated with wrath. And who go not astray. Again, lack of guidance. So let me just recap that quickly. Show us the straight way. The theme is guidance. The way of those on whom you have bestowed mercy. You have bestowed grace. The theme is mercy. Not those whose portion is in wrath. So God disassociates himself from wrath. And those who do not go astray. So the lack of guidance. So first guidance is mentioned, and then the lack of guidance is mentioned. So you can see how the themes in this chapter cohere together. And center, at the absolute center of the themes is the verse Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. And what I would like you to do is visualize in your head that you stood somewhere, in the middle of a room or somewhere outside. And I want you to almost physically situate yourself in the middle of this verse where the vow is. So Iyyaka na'budu. So perhaps on your right hand side is Iyyaka na'budu, wa iyyaka nasta'in is on your left, and you stood on the vow. Now look outward from this vow and look towards from Iyyaka na'budu to the start of the surah, the first 3 verses of the surah. It is only you whom we worship. Why do we only worship God? Because we are grateful to you, Allah. You created us and you sustain us. You are the most merciful and you are the master of the day of judgment. That is why we worship you and only you. There is an implication of this, of course, because Iyyaka na'budu turns to dust any belief in or worship of false gods that we create through extreme admiration. Now let's go back to the visualization. You stood at the same vow, and I want you to look outward again, this time towards wa iyyaka nasta'in, to the end of the surah. Iyyaka nasta'in, you alone we ask for help. Why? Because you alone can show us the straight path, the Sirat al-Mustaqim, on which we must stand firm. Mustaqim. This is the path of those you have favored with your guidance and who accepted this guidance, not those who rejected your guidance and went astray by leaving the path. There is also an implication here. If it is God alone we ask for help, then this belief turns to dust any ideas of the intercession of alive or dead saints. They cannot help or guide us. This idea appears again in Ayat al-Kursi, the verse of the throne, which also has a ring structure and employs a rational argument to explain why only Allah can help us. I will inshallah pick up Ayat al-Kursi in a later video. So, situate yourself in the middle of Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. We only seek Allah and we are grateful to Him, the most merciful. Let me leave this as the key point of our tadabbur today. Assalamu alaikum.